One woman accuses a smartphone app of sharing data with the Chinese regime. The software helps women plan their pregnancies. Chinese people living overseas finally make their way back to their home country. But citizens there denounce their return, calling them disease-ridden. A major financial services company is going bankrupt. The Chinese firm's fall from success comes after officials used it to send money abroad. And China's top diplomat encourages the U.S. to play by Beijing's rules. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A fertility smartphone app has come under scrutiny. It's been accused of sharing data with Chinese firms. NTD's Juliet Song has the details.
A Virginia resident is suing a popular fertility app for allegedly sharing her data with Chinese firms. In the complaint, she claims the app shared the data without her permission, and she's concerned the Chinese regime could have access to it.
When you're sharing them with a company that's located in China, and when the data that's being taken from consumers here in the United States is then being stored on servers in China, which we believe is the case here, we just know that the Chinese government has the ability to access any of that data.
Under Chinese law, companies have to hand over user data if regime officials ask for it. The app that's sparking controversy is called Pre-Mom. It helps women who want to conceive by tracking their ovulation. The app ranks in the top search results in both Apple and Android app stores. By 2019, it has scored 500,000 downloads. A growing number of women in the U.S. are turning to similar apps to help with baby planning. Last year, a privacy watchdog group found the Pre-Mom app was sharing user data with 3 Chinese advertising firms.
The type of information that was shared with these companies really allows them to pretty much, in essence, track your daily movements. They take off GPS location data. They can record each and every time that your particular phone uses any particular router.
Donolan says the Chinese companies can learn a lot about users through their data.
Who is this person? What are their habits? What do they like? What do they not like? They're able to get a phone number eventually with this data by doing ID bridging. Finally, they're also able to find out what other apps the person has on their device.
One of the 3 Chinese firms is owned by e-commerce giant Alibaba. Reports say the company helped the Chinese regime build a vast surveillance system to track its own citizens. Donolan does add that no evidence suggests any of the personal health data has been shared. He just filed a lawsuit and is expecting the defendant to respond in March. Pre-Mom said last year that it stopped sharing data with one of the Chinese firms and wasn't using the other 2 at the time. NTD reached out for comment but didn't get a response before airtime. Juliet Song, NTD News.
The quarantine facilities that Chinese authorities provide to people returning from abroad have poor conditions. But when people complain about the quarantine condition online, some Chinese netizens would slam them for returning to their own country.
Last Wednesday, some 40 Chinese travelers expressed dissatisfaction with their quarantine facility online. After returning from Germany, the travelers were quarantined at a subpar hotel in China's Chengdu city. The room temperature was below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The windows leaked cold air, sanitary conditions were extremely poor, and they weren't allowed to use electrical appliances. Among the passengers were a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old baby. An international student recounts that the food provided to them was often cold. Sometimes it had strange smells, and she even found hair in it. She says the windows leaked air so bad that she could actually hear the noise.
Everyone felt very cold. There was a really bad draft. I was so cold that night I couldn't sleep well. Some toilets wouldn't flush and some were clogged.
She tried asking the hotel staff, but they wouldn't help with the situation and wouldn't let her change hotels either. The student tried to plead online for help, but didn't get much sympathy. Some Chinese netizens criticized their return as bringing trouble for China. She felt very unwelcomed in her own country.
On the internet, they said, "Why do you disease-ridden people come back?" They also said, "You're bringing trouble back for China. Why do you come back?" I wanted to reply saying that I have a Chinese passport. Why can't I come back?
In response to her complaints online, the hotel even hired online commenters to counter her claims in order to maintain the hotel's image. But eventually, under pressure from different sources, the travelers were moved to rooms with better conditions. Since the pandemic began, it has become increasingly difficult for overseas Chinese citizens to return to China. The Chinese embassy in the U.S. requires returning passengers to provide double negative virus test results before they are allowed into the country, and they must be tested at a laboratory recommended by the embassy. Just last month, the embassy issued a new notice recommending Chinese citizens overseas not to return home. Don Ma, NTD News.
In some districts in Shijiazhuang City, all households have their doors sealed up. This is because these districts are considered high-risk areas. Some of the doors are even welded. If residents open the door from the inside and damage the seal, it will be considered obstruction of pandemic prevention efforts, and they will be detained for 2 weeks. In the case of an emergency, such as acute illness, residents have to apply with authorities for a permit to go to the hospital. In rural areas, houses are sometimes not built with bathrooms inside, and residents have to find other ways to use the bathroom if their doors are sealed up. Farmers will lose their livestock because nobody feeds them. A video appears to show a 70-year-old man going outside and buying some cigarettes. He was caught by police officers. In the video, a patrolman says you should stay at home, even if you have to smoke leaves. Another video appears to show a young man going back to his hometown on foot. All the villages on the way are under lockdown, and he cannot find a place to stay at night. The video shows him getting rejected at the entrance of a village and then going away. Countries across the globe are racing to get vaccine doses out to the public. But in some regions, getting the injection isn't a choice. Chinese state-run media outlet The Global Times published a commentary last week saying China must strive to create the world's fastest vaccination rate. Some Chinese citizens told us all medical workers are required to get vaccinated, plus a handful of other professions. Ms. Xiao from Shanghai explained all local hospital staff must get a dose, even though it's just doing office or administrative work.
If you don't get vaccinated, you will be laid off. They will punish you.
Chinese authorities claim the country's domestic vaccines have few side effects, but some citizens say they're not so sure.
Even if someone does get side effects, he won't talk about it. Who will talk about it? Anyone who dares to talk about it publicly will be arrested.
The new requirement falls in line with other tactics used to control the country's population. Chinese financial services company H&A Group is going bankrupt. Its downfall comes after a prestigious legacy. Once synonymous with China's global ambitions, top Chinese Communist Party officials used it to funnel money abroad. The company's creditors filed for bankruptcy last Friday. Authorities recently ordered H&A to restructure in an effort to resolve its liquidity risks. Its issues came after years of aggressive buying actions abroad. The group used $50 billion, mainly fueled by debt, to acquire stakes in businesses like Hilton and Deutsche Bank. H&A's global buying spree ended in 2017 when Beijing cracked down on foreign acquisitions to stop capital flight out of China. At roughly the same time, the U.S.-China trade war was escalating under then U.S. President Donald Trump. Since then, the group started selling its assets worldwide to pay off its debt. The pandemic complicated the situation even further last year. International travel bans hit the H&A's group's flagship business hard, called Hainan Airlines. The economic downturn that followed led to the bankruptcy filing. H&A and other major state-run companies have long been speculated of helping Chinese regime officials, mainly to get around China's capital controls and bring money abroad. Their intricate business structures seemingly help disguise the firm's true ownership. Until recently, H&A's ownership consisted of investment trusts, government agencies, and small business ventures. Major shareholders control the company through intermediary companies. Some of them are registered under small businesses or residential apartment building addresses. On Friday, 3 H&A departments released statements saying nearly $10 billion of their assets had been embezzled by shareholders and other related parties. they didn't disclose the identities of the shareholders. The head of a Chinese state-owned financial giant was executed on Friday. Lai Xiaoming formerly served as Communist Party secretary and chairman of China Huarong, a financial asset management firm. He was charged with accepting $280 million in bribes and sentenced to death. He was executed just 3 weeks after his sentencing, something both Chinese and foreign media outlets have drawn attention to. The case is being widely considered as a gesture from the Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping towards fighting corruption in the regime. But China affair analyst Wang Youquan says it'll have little effect. He's first noting that there was little transparency to be seen in the case. Authorities stated Lai's main crime was his accepting of bribes. Out of 22 bribery cases, the largest sum he accepted totaled around $100 million. Another 8 cases amounted to about $6 million each and above. Officials gave no information on what the bribes were given in exchange for. Wang also explained another reason Beijing's anti-corruption efforts won't have much effect. Wang says Lai was able to accept so much bribery money because of his unchecked power. He held 3 of the most important positions in the company, with no superiors to monitor him. Lai served as the secretary of the company's Communist Party committee, the chairman of the board, and the firm's top legal advisor, giving him final say on every decision. Even the company's disciplinary committee was subordinate to him. Wang likened the situation to communist theory. If a person gets power, they can get everything, and the same is true for money. In this case, Lai was effectively an athlete, a coach, and a referee all at the same time. Since 2013, China has dealt with over 80 officials convicted of accepting at least $15 million in bribes. The Chinese regime has a track record of underreporting these cases, so the actual data may be higher. New comments from China's top diplomat encouraged the White House to play by Beijing's rules. In the half-hour speech, diplomat Yang Jiechi laid out what he called a red line that the U.S. shouldn't cross, namely to stop interfering in what China considers its internal affairs, including issues surrounding Taiwan, Hong Kong, Tibet, and the Xinjiang region. He warned that trespassing across this line would harm U.S. interests. Before Biden took office, former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo designated Beijing's persecution of the Uyghur minority group in Xinjiang as genocide. The U.S. also imposed sanctions against Communist Party officials responsible for human rights violations in Hong Kong and Tibet. In his speech, Yang told the Biden administration to follow the One China policy with regards to Taiwan. During Trump's administration, top officials repeatedly differentiated between Taiwan and mainland China. In one interview, Pompeo said, quote, "Taiwan has not been a part of China." Yang also said the U.S. should cooperate with China on drug control. According to a 2018 report by the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, China is the largest source of illicit fentanyl and fentanyl-like substances in the United States. In 2020, the U.S. sanctioned several Chinese nationals and a company for fentanyl trafficking. Yang's speech was part of a virtual event. It was hosted by the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, a New York-based nonprofit. Hong Kong residents can now apply for a new visa to become British citizens. A migration expert reveals that applications have increased by 30 to 50%. NTD's Trevor Piper has more.
An expert says the new migration route is much easier for Hong Kongers as they don't need to invest at least £2 million or start a business in the UK.
Since the launch of the BNO visa, our inquiry for the UK migration has about increased at least 30 to 50%.
The new visa route comes after Beijing imposed a national security law on the Asian financial hub last year. The route allows those with British National Overseas or BNO status to live, study and work in the UK for 5 years, then settle here. Opinions on the streets are mixed regarding the opportunity to become British citizens.
I think comparatively it's still better than Hong Kong. For example, for young people like us, we don't know how to live or survive here, so I would consider this method.
I truly understand the saying, people are worth less when they leave their home country. If they want to move to a foreign country and think the UK is safer than Hong Kong amid a pandemic, that's their own decision.
The UK government estimates up to 154,000 BNO status holders and their dependents will come in the first year. Beijing and Hong Kong say they will no longer recognize the BNO passport as a valid travel document, but Hong Kong residents can still use their Hong Kong passports to leave and enter the region. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
Concerns over theft of intellectual property may stop thousands of Chinese academics and researchers from being allowed to enter the UK. According to the Times newspaper, the measures come amid growing concerns about Chinese students, academics, and researchers acquiring technology that could benefit China's army. The Foreign Office will introduce security vetting in 44 areas relating to national security. These include artificial intelligence, chemistry, physics, math, and computer science. For those who are already working or studying in the UK, their visas might be revoked if they are deemed a risk. Visa applicants will have to disclose extensive background information and details of their proposed research area. And more updates from Europe. Chinese companies are excluded from a bid for a Czech nuclear project, but Russia is still in play. All political parties in the Central European country of Czech Republic have agreed last week to keep Chinese companies out of a bid to build a new nuclear power plant in the country. They have not decided on Russian participation yet. Other potential bidders are from the U.S., France, and South Korea. Czech Republic security services have concerns with companies from China and Russia on the grounds of national security. The nuclear plant will be completed until 2036 or later. It will be worth at least $7 billion. Some are voicing concerns that Burma or Myanmar could grow closer to the Chinese regime. The comments follow the country's recent military takeover.
The U.S. has declared the military takeover in Burma as a coup. The label triggered restrictions on U.S. aid that can be sent to the country. Burma's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi is under house arrest. Now all eyes are on the response from the Chinese regime, which has given no meaningful comments so far.
We have noticed what happened in Myanmar, and we are learning more about the situation.
Some worry the military takeover may increase China's influence in the region.
Myanmar could grow further from politically free democratic nations and join the League of China, which is under Communist Party dictatorship.
The Southeast Asian country was under socialist rule for decades until 2011, imposed by a military-run government. But even after civilian government took over, the military remained powerful in domestic affairs. The conflict between the military and Suu Kyi may have put China in an awkward position. A Chinese military source told the South China Morning Post that's because both have a cordial relationship with China. A reporter from the Myanmar Times said the coup may not necessarily please Beijing. He told Taiwan's Central News Agency that Beijing has been supplying weapons to anti-government armed forces in Burma, and that Burma's military sees the Chinese regime as disrupting peace in the country. Back in 2011, Burma's military-backed government also suspended construction on a dam China had promised to invest in. The move angered Beijing. That's because the dam would give China control over water flow of Burma's main river. It prompted national security concerns among Burma's leaders. But at the same time, since taking power, the country's democratically elected leader Suu Kyi has dropped her critical tone towards China. She has long promoted Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, a program where China lends money to developing countries to build infrastructure while increasing its political sway. She also praised Beijing early last year for defending justice and fairness, adding that the two countries should jointly build the Burma-China common destiny. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Last week, we reported that Chinese regulators completely banned bank deposit products on third-party online platforms. Chinese media says it's set to affect over $300 billion in savings from 100 million Chinese people. A viewer asked what will happen to the money. Chinese media reports that those who already bought the savings products, they can withdraw the money when the deposit matures. Most banks that use such third-party platforms are private banks and small regional banks, so these banks will be affected the most. After the ban, state-owned national banks are likely to absorb these savings from the Chinese people. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow. Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.